The Case of the Missing General Chapter 5, Steven and Sheila Search for Clues. Even as Dorian and Frederick were in the coffee shop on Monday making their plans to help, Dorian had no idea that Steven had already met with Sheila 2 days earlier on Friday, and that the two had also begun their own earnest search for clues. In fact, on that fateful rainy Friday night, Steven and Sheila had run, with Whiskers in tow, out into the pouring rain and tumbled in a somewhat soggy heap into Steven's car. Remembering the General's case file, Steven had brought it out from its protected spot underneath his shirt and put it in the back seat for safekeeping. He then started the car, turned on the lights and windshield wipers and slowly backed out of the driveway. He had no trouble navigating the familiar twists and turns of his neighborhood, but as they got closer to the main road, Steven had started wondering if he should have let Dorian know that he and Sheila were heading to the General's apartment. Unfortunately, his brief moment of doubt and hesitation had been enough of a distraction that he had nearly missed the turn onto the main road. Reflexively, he had turned the wheel a bit too abruptly and the car had begun to skid on the wet pavement. Steven struggled to regain control of the car and Sheila had held Whiskers even closer as they narrowly avoided veering off into a ditch. When they had finally came to a screeching halt on the side of the road, they sat a bit stunned and catching their breath until Steven turned to Sheila and apologized. "Wow, I am really sorry, Sheila. That was entirely my fault. I took the turn too fast." Sheila was shook up but seemed to be recovering quickly. "Oh, please don't blame yourself, Steven. I could not have driven in these conditions at all, which is why we did decide to take your car. I just thank God we are okay." Steven let out a sigh of relief and nodded in agreement. "Are you feeling up to getting back on the road?" After taking a deep breath, Sheila answered. "Yes, I think so. How about you?" Gripping the steering wheel, Steven had given her a determined nod before carefully maneuvering the car back onto the main road. Thankfully, the rest of their drive had no more mishaps for them as Sheila gave him directions to her father's apartment. Just as they had pulled into the General's parking lot, the heavy rainfall finally had started to taper off and Steven found a parking space with relative ease. Hurrying out of the car, the splash of cold air seemed to have revived and refreshed them as Sheila, who was holding Whiskers and Steven with his arm around her, walked together through the front entrance of the General's apartment complex. Immediately they were greeted in the lobby by a distinguished gray-haired gentleman wearing a gold and blue uniform. "Sheila, what brings you here at this late, or should I now say, early morning hour?" Sheila smiled at the man with a warm familiarity. "It is good to see you, Sal. I know this is a strange hour to be visiting, but I do have an explanation for it." Sal regarded Sheila holding Whiskers and Steven standing protectively next to her with an openly puzzled yet kindly expression. "Is everything okay, Sheila? A couple of men I did not recognize came by here earlier to see your father, but when I rang the General's apartment he never answered." Sheila grew pale and Steven, fearing she might faint, moved in even closer to her as she replied. "Sal, you know I trust you. After all, you and my father have been good friends for many years. The truth is, everything is not okay at all." Sal leaned forward then and looking worried spoke in a hushed tone. "I thought something out of the ordinary might be going on and I don't want to upset you even more, Sheila, but those two men seemed odd to me, far too serious for just a social call." Sheila looked at Sal in alarm as she connected the dots. "I don't doubt it at all, Sal. I have a feeling they were here because of my father's upcoming investigation." Sal's eyes widened with surprise. "An investigation of the General? Your father is the most honest man I know." Sheila nodded vigorously. "I know it, Sal. I don't really understand any of this myself, but he apparently filed some kind of controversial report." Sal let out a long and low whistle as his gaze fell pointedly on Steven. I am glad to see you aren't going through this alone, Sheila, but I am mighty sorry to hear of the General's troubles. Is there anything I can do to help? Sheila teared up, moved by the loyalty of her father's friend. Thank you, Sal. I really don't want you to get into any trouble on my account, but I think my father has gone missing and Steven and I here would like to check his apartment for clues. Just then a group of boisterous people entered the lobby and started heading in their direction. Sal, needing to tend to them, gave Sheila a reassuring pat on the shoulder and then pointed to the lobby's main elevator. Go right on up, Sheila, and take all the time you need. Sheila gave Sal a grateful smile and stepped into the elevator with Whiskers while Steven lingered to quickly thank Sal and shake his hand before joining her. As the elevator doors closed, Sheila gently handed Whiskers over to Steven and pressed the button for the 7th floor. Within seconds the elevator bell rang and they stepped out into a long carpeted hallway. Sheila walked only a short distance down the hall to her father's apartment and after momentarily searching in her purse for the key she opened the door. However, instead of going directly inside, she stood as though frozen to the spot at the threshold. I don't know if I can go through with this, Steven. I am not ashamed to admit that I am afraid of what we might find. Steven gave her a reassuring smile and came closer to peer inside the apartment. What if Whiskers and I went in first? He is quite the watchcat, you know. Forgetting her fears for a moment, Sheila laughed as she pictured sweet Whiskers attempting to defend them. Okay, Steven, you did it. I don't feel as scared now. Steven laughed with her as he led the way into the General's living room, which was quite spacious and decorated in shades of stately white and gold. He promptly set Whiskers down to roam freely about and Sheila entered the apartment after him, already looking a good deal less pale and more relaxed. So what do you think, Sheila? Any ideas where we might search first? Sheila looked intently around the living room that largely consisted of an entertainment center with 2 standing lamps on either side, a pair of end tables, a glass coffee table and a long white sofa. I don't see anything out of the ordinary here or in the dining room. I have a feeling that if we are going to find anything, it would probably be in my father's study. Steven followed Sheila as she walked past the kitchen and into a smaller room with a large solid wood desk and an impressive series of maps and charts covering most of the walls. Steven stood shaking his head in amazement at the sight of them. Wow, Sheila, do you know what all these charts and maps are about? Sheila bit her lip anxiously, suddenly looking a bit distraught. I have no idea. My father has never told me all that much about his work, but I suppose that is probably because most of it is classified. Steven moved in to more closely examine one of the charts. You know, this reminds me of something I saw in your father's file. It had coordinates similar to these, I think. Sheila's curiosity was definitely piqued. Coordinates? What kind of coordinates and to what, I wonder? Steven continued to stare intently at the chart. When I studied your father's file, I could not make much sense of it, but what I remember most is that he kept referring to the idea that interdimensional portals somehow connect different locations in space and time. Sheila struggled to comprehend the foreign concept, but she was leaning toward believing it, especially considering what an extreme reaction there had been to her father's report. It sounds like my father might have somehow proved that interdimensional portals really do exist. Steven nodded in agreement as he pointed to one of the charts in particular. Sheila, the coordinates here have been circled and your father has written down a specific location next to them. Sheila rushed over to look at the chart more closely. I know where this is. It's about an hour's drive out of the city. Steven and Sheila looked at each other in astonishment as they both came to the same conclusion. You don't suppose your father could have gone there? Sheila stared hard at the chart before answering. If that really is the location of one of these portals, why would he want to go there? Sheila stifled a sob before continuing, "Why would he leave without telling me?" Steven drew Sheila in close. "After getting to know you, Sheila, I feel confident your father would never want to leave you like this, especially without telling you." Sheila nodded. "Yes, of course, thank you for reminding me of that, Steven. My father surely has a good reason for not contacting me." "Maybe he wanted to find out if it's real," Steven suggested softly, sensing the turmoil within her. "He might have believed it was worth the risk." "But what's worth risking your life for?" Sheila replied, her voice wavering. "This could be a government cover-up or something far more sinister." "We should go to that location," Steven proposed, a hint of adrenaline in his voice as he glanced at the clock. "We can drive there right now, it's getting late, and it might be our only chance to find anything." Sheila hesitated, glancing back at the charts that seemed to pulse with energy, a lifeline to her father. "What if we're not prepared for what we might find?" "Then we'll prepare on the way," Steven replied resolutely. "Besides, he's your father. We owe it to him to at least try." With a final look around the room, her heart a mix of dread and determination, Sheila nodded. "Okay. Let's go." For a moment they stood hugging until Whiskers began to meow loudly at their feet for attention, and Sheila managed a laugh. "Don't worry, Whiskers, we could never forget about you." Steven would have laughed too if his reporter instincts had not kicked into high gear again. "Sheila, do you think your father would mind if we took that chart with us?" Sheila glanced at the chart before answering. "I actually had the same thought." Steven nodded vigorously and hurriedly removed the chart from the wall. Whiskers suddenly jumped up into Sheila's arms then, and she hugged him affectionately. "I think Whiskers is ready to go now too." Steven nodded as he carefully rolled up the chart to make it easier to carry. "So am I, Sheila. I can't explain it, call it my reporter's instinct, but I think we found our clue and we need to get out of here fast."